In section 2.3, we are working on composition of functions, and the notation f of g of negative 1 can be written as f of g of negative 1. Sounds like I said the same thing, but it's written differently. And so you can see by this notation that we are going to first find g of negative 1 and calculate out a value. And then when we get that value, that gets plugged in or substituted in for f. So g of negative 1 looks like negative 1 squared minus 2 times negative 1 minus 6. So inside my parentheses now is g of negative 1 all filled in, my g function with a negative 1 plugged in. And then if I calculate that out, I get 1 plus 2 minus 6. And then you end up with f of negative 3. And then we just go ahead and calculate out f of negative 3. My f function is 3 times negative 3 plus 1, and that gives you negative 9 plus 1, which is negative 8. So my final answer is f of g of negative 1 is equal to negative 8. The negative 8 is the final answer. You don't get like two answers. This is it, negative 8. Now, I don't like to write my problem out that way. That's how your textbook does it. And then maybe if you had Algebra 2 and you did this in Algebra 2, maybe it was written that way. It confuses me and it looks like a hot mess. So I prefer to do it another way, which I'll show you right here, or at least you're doing the same thing, it's just written a little differently. I am going to first calculate out separately f of negative 2, and then I'm going to take that answer and plug it into g later. So first, the inner function all by itself, f of negative 2, and that looks like 3 times negative 2 plus 1, which is negative 6 plus 1, which is negative 5. And then after I get that negative 5, then I go ahead and put that answer into g. So now we'll do the outer function g with the negative 5 substituted in. And that is equal to negative 5 squared minus 2 times negative 5 minus 6. You get 25 plus 10 minus 6. 35 minus 6 is 29. And so g of f of negative 2 is equal to 29. 29 is the final answer of the whole problem. You don't get two separate answers, it's just 29. And both of these problems are basically done the same way, but are written a little bit differently. And you can write it the way I did for number 1 if you want to, or you can do it the way I like to do it, which is separate the problem into 2 steps so that it's just a little bit cleaner. Or maybe you don't think it looks cleaner, but I do. So take your pick. All right, so I'm going to put a 1 into f and get an answer, and then take that answer and put it into h. It's kind of like you're working right to left. So f of 1, we'll do that first. And my f function is 3x plus 1. So we have 3 times 1 plus 1, which is 4. And then we're going to go ahead and do h of 4. And my h function, I kind of have it covered up over here. But h is x cubed. Okay, so we have h of 4, which is going to be 4 cubed. And then 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. So my final answer, h of f of 1 is equal to 64. And then lastly, we have g of h of 1/2. And I'm going to put my 1/2 into h first and get an answer. And then once I get that answer, I'm going to substitute it into g. So my h function is x cubed, so we'll have 1/2 cubed, and 1/2 cubed expanded out is 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2. And when you multiply fractions, you multiply straight across. And so we're going to have 1 over 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. And now I'm going to take that 1 over 8 and I'm going to substitute it back into g. So we'll do g of 1 over 8. That goes into that. And where's my g function? G is x squared minus 2x minus 6. So 1/8 squared minus 2 times an 8th minus 6. Okay, so 1 over 8 times 1 over 8 is 1 over 64. And then 2 times 1/8, or negative 2 times 1/8 is negative 2/8. And that is going to reduce to 1/4. And then we have minus 6. And I'll just turn him into a fraction. You can just put everything into a calculator, but I'm going to do this by hand. 64 is our common denominator. So I'm going to change 4 to 64th by multiplying by 16. You're going to have to times by 16 on the top as well. And then I'm going to change 1 to 64 by multiplying it by 64, and 64 times 6 in my calculator is 384. And so that is going to equal 1 minus 16 minus 384 all over 64. And then we do 1 minus 16 minus 384, and you get negative 399 over 64. And I'm kind of out of room here, so I'm just going to box off my final answer. G of h of 1/2 is equal to negative 399 over 64, and that is your final answer. Do not get two separate answers in each problem. It's just whatever is that last calculation is your answer.